Hello and welcome to the 63rd session of Porous Media Tea Time Talks. We are part of the Interpol Young Academy, an ambitious initiative by and for early career researchers working on porous media sciences around the world. We are part of the International Society of Porous Media, or Interpol. With these webinars, we aim to give junior researchers, primarily PhD candidates and postdocs, an opportunity to present their work to the scientific community. Our vision is to level the playing field for the next generation of exceptional researchers by providing a forum for equal opportunity exposure, encouraging interdisciplinary research, and also enhancing career development for the young porous media scientists. My name is Mohammad Nouraipur. I am a researcher at the CO2 and hydrogen storage group at the University of Oslo, and with me, I have Mahdi from CNRS in France. And thank you for joining us today. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. We are pleased to welcome Hao Shi to our webinar today. He is going to address an important topic about how water flows through asphalt pavements under tire load pressure. This is, of course, a critical research for understanding how pavement permeability and water damage influences the medium. Hao Shi and his collaborator developed a dynamic water flow setup to measure permeability under high-frequency pressure loads. Using X-ray tomography, they captured the 4D distribution of water and evolution of water pathways within the asphalt mixture. They identified zones for most affected dynamic pressures and analyzed void deformation and water pathway changes. With this research, they introduced a new permeability model based on the Poiseuille equation, considering the complexity of water pathways within the pavement. Please join me in welcoming Hao Shi as he will share his wonderful research with us today. Thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thanks for your Mohammed's very warm introduction, and also thanks for offering me this opportunity to share my work in the porous medium triple T. I'm Hao, and I'm a PhD student from the Harbin Institute of Technology. And today I will give a presentation about the multi-scale dynamic flow in asphalt mixture. So the asphalt mixture is a very common material we use in the asphalt pavement, and because it's being used in the outdoors, it's always suffering from the ambient environment, like the temperature, like the moisture, and also the water. So especially coupling with the tear and a very special dynamic water pressure load, the post pressure can be occurred. When the tear is loading on the top of the of an open void, the surface water is pumped in and resulting in a positive water pressure. And when the tear is leaving and the water is being pumped out, and the pressure can be negative. So a post pressure can be loaded on the top of the asphalt pavement with the tear running over and over again. So in post scale, the very fast post pressure can result in some damages like the micro cracking, like the interface damages, and also the property degradation. And with the accumulation of these micro damages for years maybe, and in the pavement scale, some disease like the pothole appears as a consequence. So as I mentioned, the water damage in the asphalt pavement is a multi-scale process, and both in the space and the time. For improving the pavement durability, it's very essential to understand how does the water transfer through the pavement in the different scales. And so we firstly focused on the its dynamic water flow behavior in a core scale. Yeah. And according to that, we developed a fluid device which can load the post pressure on the top of the sample, and we collected the water at the bottom and calculated the flow rate. And the whole device can be put inside a CT scanner and capture what is happening inside. And here is the flow curve. At the very beginning, and there's no connectivity in the sample, so the flow ratio is 0. And after like 30 minutes maybe, and the dynamic pressure and the dynamic water breaks through the sample, and we detected the flow ratio. And after that, the flow ratio keeps increasing and until the end of the test. According to the behavior of the curve, we divided the flow curve into 4 stages, and we proposed the equation to describe this. And this is the test result for the different materials. AC10 has the lowest porosity, and AC16 has the highest porosity. As we can see, the sample with a higher porosity, the flow ratio, it goes higher, and the dynamic process, it goes faster. And for AC16, the flow curve does not have any, the flow curve does not have the stage 2, and after breaking through the sample, and the curve go to the stage 3 directly. So, so this means the flow curve, they have the huge dependence on the material porosity. And besides that, and we also test the flow curves under various frequency and also the pressure load. The frequency represents the speed of the car, and the pressure load represents the tire load. As we can see here, with the increasing of the speed, and the tire load is going heavier, and the flow ratio was increasing faster and reached a higher value. So at some point, the frequency and the pressure influences the flow curves in a similar way. So we use the flow ratio as the stage 4 as the reference, and developed an equivalent relationship between the frequency and the pressure. As we can see here, when the tire speed is slow, which is the slow frequency range, it corresponds to a very small pressure increase. And however, in the high speed range, the frequency or the speed has a huge influence on pavement water flow behavior. So, so this means the curve with a higher speed, it always results in a more serious water damage. To understand why dynamic flow curves shapes like that or behave like that, we use the micro-CT to capture the micro-water flow and the passageway deformation as different stages of the dynamic flow process. And here is a picture showing the 3D water distribution and the water flow passageway. The blue part is the water. I mean the first 4 pictures. The blue part is the water. The red part is the air. And we can see the water amount or water volume is increasing along with the dynamic process. And more wires was breaking through by the dynamic pressure. And also at the same time, the quantity of the water passageway is also increasing. And you can see there's more and more passageway appears along with the dynamic process. And we calculate the spatial distribution of the water saturation inside the sample. As we can see in the upper part of the sample, the water saturation is always higher than the bottom. And also in the center of the sample, the saturation is higher. This means the water is more likely to gather at the top center of the sample. The blue part of the sample, I call it like the surface influence zone. And also, the water saturation in the passageway is significantly higher than the other wires, especially in the last 2 stages. This indicates the dynamic water, they always prefer to choose the upper voids and also the passageway to flow through. To analyze the void deformation, and we developed the 3D digital void mode so we can quantify the void translation and the volume changing. And here is the result. The bubble in the picture shows the translation and the volume changing ratio of a particular void in the sample. And the position of the bubble represents the actual location in the sample. So from these pictures, we can see at the top of the sample, the void translation and also the volume changing is always higher than the bottom. The void has a trend to moving down and the volume is shrinking. So this is because the dynamic water on the top, they offers a compaction effect to the sample and also to the void. Especially the void in the passageway, the striking effect is more obvious than the dry void. So we can imagine during the dynamic water flow, and the voids of the passageway is going smaller and smaller, and due to the dynamic compaction. So far, our analysis is all conducted in a very slow time scale. And however, the dynamic water flow in the asphalt mixture is very fast because the tear load is very fast, because the leaving is very fast. So how could we capture this fast or maybe this transient process? And thanks for the support by the Oxide Network and also the host from the Ghent University, we performed a fast scan to the asphalt mixture loading the dynamic water pressure. And here is a video of the dynamic response to the water pressure. It just looked like a heartbeat, so I put a heart here, and as we can see with the dynamic pressure loading, the water in the void is pumping in and out. However, not all of these voids of the water can access, like here or maybe here. The void has no response to the dynamic process. And besides that, we can also see the aggregate is moving up and down along with the dynamic process. And this is also a part of the dynamic response. So after all of this analysis, what can we learn from it, or what can and what the result is trying to telling us? As we obtained before, the flow ratio, the flow curve, is increasing with the dynamic process. That is because the dynamic water, they kept breaking through the voids, and more water passageway was formed during this process. So as a result, the water passes with the quantity. The quantity of the water passageway is increasing in this process. However, in the last stage, in the stage 4, the flow ratio is turning to stable. This is because the voids of the passageway is shrinking at the same time. So basically, it's the computation of these two parameters and resulting in the S-shaped flow curve. So according to this phenomena, we use Porous' law. I hope I pronounce it right. We use this law to develop our permeability model, and we found that the flow ratio has a direct proportion with the square of the passageway wide rate, and also it has the inverse proportion with the passageway quantity. And we use our multi-scale data to validate this model, and the result, I would say it's not that bad. For some sample, and they matched very well, like the first sample. but still there are some samples they have a very big difference. Anyway, at least our model can simulate the ash growing trade of the flowing curve, so it can contribute to predict the permeability of the asphalt mixture in some way. So for the conclusion, and we proposed a 4-stage dynamic flow curves for asphalt mixture, and we see the water accumulates in the upper parts in the sample and also in the passageway. And the quantity of the passageway is increasing, but the width is shrinking at the same time. And in the last part, we developed a new permeable model and based on our multi-scale flow. And this work is a result from the collaboration with the TU Eindhoven, Harbin Institute of Technology, and also the Ghent University. And thanks for all of our contribution, and thank you.
Mahdi, do you want to go ahead and start if you have any question?
Yeah. Me personally, I had just a technical question. How did you get your 3D images? Because I think the frequency was quite high. Were you continuously getting the images for different angles, or you choose just two or three angles and just took the image over time?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good question because here, I mean the multi-scale, the 3D images here I use here. I just I do the scanning in a stable condition, and I mean I stopped the dynamic process and put it to the I stopped the dynamic flow and do the scanning, and afterwards I do the dynamic flow again. So basically I just choose this 4 times 4-time point during the dynamic process and do the scanning and to see what and what is the difference between each other, and to see the 3D wide evolution during this dynamic process. Yeah, but for this one, because we performed the continuous scan to the during loading the dynamic pressure, and the dynamic pressure, the period they can last for 1 minute, and for each scan and for each CT scan, it conducts 20 40 minutes. So basically in 1 cycle of the dynamic pressure, and we obtained 7 3D reconstruction sample, and so we can obtain this 4D images here.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. For the people who have question, maybe they can type it down in the comment section and we can read it. Yeah, for now. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we lost Hao. Let's see if he comes back, and then we can ask a question. And then I guess we have a question in the comments. It seems that we lost his connection. So maybe we can switch to the second speaker of the session.
Yeah. Okay. So our second speaker is Happiness Imuetinyan. He is a Nigerian research engineer pursuing a PhD in process engineering. His research focuses on convection in saturated transparent porous media for CO2 underground storage applications. It also involves fluid flow in porous media and experimental thermodynamics, particularly the behavior of complex fluids such as CO2 mixture. He uses advanced optical techniques to study flow dynamics and thermophysical properties under varying conditions. The floor is yours, Happiness.
Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction. As the presenter has said, my name is Happiness. I'm a PhD student at the University of Porous in France. I'm working within the experimental optics team of the Mechanics and Physics of Porous Media Group, where we use optical techniques to study fluid dynamics. So today I'll be presenting our work titled Convective Plume Spreading in Model Transparent Porous Media. So what informed our decision to study this? What is the background and what is our motivation? We now know that there is a direct relationship between CO2 and climate change, which was confirmed by this graph taken from a 1967 paper by Manabel, where he was able to explain that as the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere doubles, the increase in the surface temperature also rises to about 2.3 degrees, which confirms that the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere is directly responsible for the increase in the surface temperature. Then currently, right now, the Earth is currently experiencing an increase of the surface temperature to about 1.2 degrees Celsius, and the amount of CO2 concentration in the atmosphere right now is about 420 ppm. So due to all this, those emissions we need to be removed from the atmosphere, which is one of the motivations for this work. And according to the IPCC, it has been known that for the most viable options for storage of CO2 is the ones that have to do with geosequestration. And one of them is depleted water aquifers. And during CO2 storage in depleted water aquifer, different trapping mechanism takes place. We have structural, residual, solubility, and mineral trapping. But we are very much interested in solubility trapping because it's on the higher scale of the increase in storage security. So that is why we are interested in that. And during the storage of CO2 in depleted water aquifer, the CO2, as it's being injected, is being trapped by a cap rock, and the CO2 moves to the top. Then the CO2 dissolves in the brine, and it forms a boundary of a CO2-rich brine. Then as more CO2 is being dissolved, it becomes heavier than the underlying brine. Then it moves down due to convection. So for convective dissolution, convective plume spreading has been studied a lot of times in literature, most especially people doing experiments using 2D Earnshaw cells and other 2D systems. This is a starting point for us to be able to study convective dissolution, but it does not represent the real formation because it's not a porous system, it's not a 3D system. Then other researchers have also studied three-dimensional systems using various visualization techniques, such as X-ray, MRI, and laser-induced fluorescence. With this system, they are able to determine the convective dissolution regimes, and they are able to characterize the process. Also, recently, a member of our team used the shadowgraph technique to study 3D convective dissolution in free medium, which was a way to confirm the use of shadowgraphy to study this process. So currently, what I'm doing is using the same shadowgraph technique to be able to study fluid flow convective dissolution in porous medium, which is the focus of this work. So I'll just go briefly into what convective dissolution means for those that are not familiar with the phenomenon. So convective dissolution is a process that takes place when an overlying fluid dissolves into an underlying fluid by convection. So let's take, for example, we have a porous medium which is saturated with brine of height H. We know CO2 initially is lighter than brine. Then as the CO2 is injected, it dissolves in the brine and forms a layer of CO2-rich brine. Then as more CO2 is being dissolved, that boundary layer grows and its density increases and becomes larger than the density of the CO2-free brine. Once that occurs, we have convective plumes that move down due to convection. And for us to characterize this process, there is a dimensionless number called the Rayleigh number, which is used to characterize the convective dissolution process, which is a function of the porous media characteristics and the fluid characteristics. And for convection to take place, a critical Rayleigh number must be reached for convection to start. And for porous media, it has been known to be 4 pi square, depending on the boundary condition and the type of system. So what is shadowgraphy? Shadowgraphy, which is the optical technique we use here, shadowgraphy is a very popular and very old technique which has been known for decades that deals with working in visible light. And it measures the variation in the index of refraction within the system. So a typical setup for this is just have to do with, you have a light source, which is a single wavelength light source. We try to avoid using lasers because it interferes with the intensity maps. Then you have a detector to record the intensity maps. So you can adjust the parameters of the shadowgraphy with the distance between the reference plane and the recording plane. So the larger it is, the smaller the refractive index variation you can see, and the smaller this X distance is, the larger the refractive index variation you can observe. So these are some of the first images of shadowgraphy from many decades ago. This one has to do with a bullet fired into a concrete, and this has to do with a wave around a vortex edge. But recently, due to the advent of a very advanced CCD and CMOS camera, you can be able to study both fluid flow and convection as being shown here. This is a particular experiment where this is a particular non-equilibrium fluctuation experiment where shadowgraphy is used to study the appearance and the disappearance of convective structures within a pure fluid. So for us to be able to study convective plume spreading, first we need to design our porous medium. So the technique we use for designing our porous medium is the refractive index matching. So what the refractive index matching means is that you have a porous medium which is made up of glass beads and saturating fluid. So we need to match the refractive index of the glass beads to that of the saturating fluid so that it becomes transparent for the camera to observe the flow. So we built this setup, which is a shadowgraph setup that allows us to be able to do the refractive index matching. Then this is a particular porous medium, index matched porous medium, which is shown by this shadowgraph image. As you can see here, for this cuvette A, you can see that the glass beads is becoming transparent, but this is very visible. So this is how the refractive index is done. But the procedure we use for the refractive index have to do with two key parameters. So what we do is that we prepare different solution of each of the different concentration of the solution that we want to use, and we determine the image intensity ratio, which have to do with the intensity of light to the porous medium to the intensity of light to the frame medium. So once we have that, then we also calculate the standard deviation of the images. Then we plot that against the concentration of the mixtures. And we determine from a criteria that the highest intensity ratio, the particular solution that gives us the highest intensity ratio, and the lowest standard deviation is the best matching solution that will make the system transparent, as been shown by Roman numeral 2 here, as this image shown here. So once we have this transparent porous medium, we went ahead and we commenced the convective plume spreading experiment. So we built another setup which is similar to the one we use for the refractive index matching, that has a light source. You have a cuvette holder to hold the sample cell and an SCMOS camera to record the flow. So this is an image of the sample cell. What it entails is that we inject a miscible fluid above a saturated porous medium. Then we observe the propagation of the plumes and the spreading of the plumes over time. So for us to be able to do that, we vary the concentration of various fluid, which you can see from experiment D to L, and we calculated various parameters and various dimensionless numbers. The properties of the porous medium: permeability is in the power of 10 to the power 9 meters square and porosity of 49%. Then the Rayleigh number is within this range of 1,100 to about 59,500, which is within the range of common CO2 storage operation taking place industrially. And for us, we observed that for experiment K and L, no convection was observed. So for us to be able to explain the scaling properties, which we are going to generate later, it's very important for us to know the flow regime of our experiment. So for Darcy experiment, the flow regime must be within these defined parameters, meaning that the Reynolds number and the Peclet number must be far less than 1. But for our experiment, we notice that none of our experiment is in the full Darcy regime, even though for experiment H to L, the Reynolds number is less than 1, but the Peclet number does not obey this condition of Darcy regime. So what are the results that we got from this experiment? So the first result was to look at the plume propagation, the propagation of the plumes over time. We designed an image processing protocol that have to do with calculating variance of image differences. So as you can see here, this is our images at different time within the plume evolution. So we calculated 3 different spreading stages. We have the early, the mid, and the late stage spreading. So this particular curve shows us the full convective dissolution process, as I will explain now. Here we see the mass diffusion, the onset time of convection, the convective dissolution with constant flux, and the shutdown of convection. So we were able to observe the plume evolution over time. Then we went ahead and looked at the plume evolution for different Rayleigh numbers. As you can see here, this is the variance curve showing for different Rayleigh numbers. You can see that, as expected, this Rayleigh number, which is the least Rayleigh number, has the longest time, because the peak of this the maximum variance determines the time at which the plumes get to the bottom of the domain. So it takes a longer time for the smallest Rayleigh number to get to the bottom of the domain. So meaning that as the Rayleigh number increases, the speed of the plumes also increases. So that is what this is showing us. So we went and so let's plot the normalized variance against the dimensionless time so that we can be able to see clearly the onset time of convection. As you can see here, the onset time of convection for the larger Rayleigh number is higher than that for the smaller Rayleigh number, which is what we expect. So once we have studied the overall plume evolution, we went ahead and calculated what we call the convective front velocity. So the convective front velocity for us is the velocity of the first and early plumes as it travels downwards to the bottom of the domain. This is very important because it helps to be able to delineate the effectiveness of the convective mixing process. So this video shows how we were able to calculate our convective front velocity. So what we did was that here we calculated line variances for each of the images after the fluid injection. Then we designed a threshold variance, which is intersection with the variance curve, tells us the position of the plumes as it travels downwards. Then we generated a distance curve, which from this distance curve, we were able to now get the velocity profile. So this is the protocol which we use in calculating our convective front velocity. So our convective front velocity was gotten from the constant part of the velocity profile. That is how we got our average convective front velocity. So once we have gotten that, we went ahead and we plotted the convective front velocity against the density difference, which we obtained during convection. We observed the scaling law, and we saw that the CFV increases with increasing density difference. We also dimensionalized the velocity and plotted it against Rayleigh number. We saw also the same thing. As Rayleigh number increases, dimensionless velocity also increases. So we went ahead and let's compare to various experiments that have been done in literature that use other type of visualization technique. So we compare with two experiments. These two experiments were done using X-ray CT, and one of them was in the Darcy regime, one of them was in the non-Darcy regime. As you can see here, this blue, the one in blue, has a scaling of RA raised to power 1.0C, which is close to 1, and this was in the Darcy regime, and this other one was in the non-Darcy regime, which is comparable to our own experiment, which has a scaling of 1.4. So we now say, okay, let's transfer this to a particular CCS site, CO storage site. So we looked at the Installer CO2 site in Algeria. We started operation in 2004 with these reservoir properties. So assuming a density-driven convection of the plumes and the plume reconstruction after a number of years, the velocity of the plumes in this particular CO2 site was about 0.021, which is within the range of what we got in our experiment. So which was very good for us. So in conclusion, we have been able to develop an experimental technology based on shadowgraphy to be able to study convective dissolution in transparent porous medium. For the Rayleigh number range which we studied, we observed a superlinear scaling of the convective front velocity and the Rayleigh number, which is in line with the non-Darcy regime in which our experiment was in. This is the first of the series of convective dissolution experiments that has been carried out in transparent porous medium using shadowgraphy. But one thing we want to point out is that this experiment was conducted at atmospheric condition using miscible analog fluid to generate convection. But the Rayleigh number range of the experiment is within the range which is being observed in various CO2 sites. We have also performed experiments using CO2 at elevated temperature and pressure, and the results are comparable. But the result, we are still doing some analysis, but what we are saying is that the results are very, very similar. So for further details, if you want to know more about how we are able to design the porous medium, the protocol, the technique, you can check our paper in Applied Optics. Then if you want to know more about this particular study, which I just presented, you can check our paper in Transport in Porous Media Journal. And you can contact me via email if you have any questions, collaborations, or anything. Thank you for listening, and we appreciate all partners and all collaborators.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Happiness. Very interesting and insightful talks. People who are online can type down their question in the comment section, and I'm gonna read them to Happiness. Meanwhile, I had personally a question from Porous Media perspective.
Okay.
Do you think the topology of your porous media, because you use a bunch of glass beads as your porous media. Do you think if you change your porous media and you give different structure to it, would impact the results that you get? And if yes, how do you think it's going to impact them? Like if you increase the heterogeneity or like the pore shape, pore size of your porous media?
Well, for us, I think changing the type of porous medium will not actually affect the results so much, because what is driving the convection is the Rayleigh number. If the Rayleigh number is still within the same range, I think we are going to get the same results. That is one. Two is that for our experiment, we calculated the representative elementary volume. So the experiment that was conducted was within the representative elementary volume, which can be scaled up to different systems. So once we are in the same Rayleigh number range and in the same flow regime, we should get the same thing.
All right. Okay. We don't have any questions in the comment section. Okay. Thank you very much again for your presentation. Maybe I can bring Hao Shi up again to read the question that is in the comments actually. Yeah. Okay, so we lost you during your talk, Hao. So we had actually a question about your talk, and how. So did you realize the reason behind the mismatch you show on your graph?
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I mean, asphalt mixture is we're trying to it is, how to say that? I mean, the asphalt mixture is a mix of the aggregates, the asphalt, and also the minus filler, and all of this, and all of this, we put that stuff we put all of this stuff together and to compact as a sample. So in this process, it's very hard to make a very similar sample in one time. So yeah, we already try to control the contact of the asphalt, the contact of the aggregates. They should be the same, but also the shape of the aggregates and also the distribution of the asphalt, they all impact the result of the experiment. So that is a part we cannot control. So so basically, in our result, in our region, and all of our we do a lot of the same test in one go, and to see what is the really trade. So in the last image, I put like at least 4 or 5 4 images that represents to the 4 different samples. So we can see that I mean the first one is matched well, but the other 3 doesn't. That is because the wide structure inside the sample, they have a huge difference.
Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for your answer. I don't see any more comments and questions here. So thank you again, both of you, for participating in our webinar. For our next session, we have 2 amazing talks from King Abdullah University. It's gonna be a Saudi Arabia Interport chapter because actually this year they won the national chapter award. So the next session is gonna be for the Saudi Arabia specific. Please note that, and put a reminder for these amazing talks. Again, me as a part of Young Society, Young Porous Interport Society, as the group of the Porous Media Tea Time Talk. Thank you again for joining us today and participating in our webinar. Hope to see you next time. Thank you again.